Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Brian from the Daily AI Show. Welcome to another, I believe it's our 16th Saturday Conundrum. And if you have never joined us before in this particular type of episode, it is a bit different. As a real quick update here, we do live shows Monday through Friday. That is the core bread and butter of our business. You will meet myself as well as many other co-hosts, and we do a live show. We're actually coming up pretty soon on episode 500, depending on when you listen to this. We may have already passed it. So this episode on Saturday mornings is different because unlike, other than the fact that you're hearing me record live and talk to you as I am, the rest of this episode is actually all AI created. And you're going to hear two, or in this case, four, I'll talk about that in a second, four hosts talk back and forth and debate this topic, whatever the conundrum is. So the process is pretty straightforward. I use ChatGPT as a starting point, and there's a lot of back and forth with me and ChatGPT to really get a conundrum that I feel is, juicy, is a good debate, something we can really, sink into. And then after I do that, I give it to Perplexity because I do love the way the deep research and Perplexity will equally debate two sides of a subject. From there, once I'm happy with that, it goes over to Google Notebook LM, and with some adjusting and maybe some retries, we get the podcast that you're about to hear. Now, what's interesting about this podcast today is, unlike in the past where we've only had the two standard voices, all of a sudden when I was doing the listen back on this one, we actually have four voices in this podcast episode. Really interesting. So I don't know if that's a new feature that's rolling out. Perhaps we're just hearing the beginnings of it, but interesting to start to hear some other voices in the conversation, although they're not the main ones in it. So have a listen out for that. And here's the conundrum that we're going to be talking about today. It has everything to do with AI being in part of the hiring process. Something I would imagine some of you listening to this have actually gone through in your life, whether that was a full interview or a AI avatar, whether you talked to a company that didn't necessarily disclose they were using AI, or maybe you did do some pre-interviewing with a company who fully supported AI and said, hey, this is just a way for us to get up to speed quicker so we can have more human interactions. The reality is there's a lot of good and a lot of bad that can come out of putting AI into the interview process. So here's the conundrum that we're going to talk about, or our AI hosts are going to talk about today. When a silent algorithm becomes the gatekeeper to opportunity, it promises fewer human prejudices and lightning fast decisions. Yet, it can misread a stutter as anxiety or a cultural idiom as hostility, quietly sidelining real talent. If we leave hiring entirely to the model, some people gain a fair shot they never had, but others lose the chance to explain the very trait that makes them valuable. If we slow the process to add appeals and human override, bias seeps back in the door, and the door closes on candidates who can't wait weeks for answer. So, who do we protect first? The dignity of being seen and heard, even when that reopens old prejudices? Or the statistical fairness of a machine that can never know the story behind an outlier, especially when that outlier might be you? All right, let's go ahead and dive into the conversation today. It's a good one. I hope you enjoy it. And remember, have a listen for those other two voices that come into the conversation, because that is definitely new from Google Notebook LM. Really interesting. All right, enjoy, guys.
Okay, think about this. What if the first step to your next big career move isn't, through a friendly face, but actually through a line of code? Today, we're taking a deep dive into one of the most pressing debates really reshaping economic mobility, which is the rise of artificial intelligence in hiring.
It's a core conundrum, isn't it? I mean, do we just fully embrace the efficiency of algorithmic screening, even if that means being judged by code we can't really interrogate? Do we just trust statistical fairness over, personal context? Or on the other hand, do we insist on the, let's face it, often slow, imperfect human interview? Preserving that chance, that critical chance, to maybe explain the quirks an algorithm might just flag as a risk.
Right. And our mission today is really to unpack these arguments, both for and against AI in recruitment. We want to distill the key insights from the sources we've looked at and help you understand the sort of invisible edges of this new doorway to opportunity. So let's unpack this. What's actually happening? Like right now, in the hiring landscape, how has that first filter for jobs really changed?
Yeah, because it used to be you'd spend ages crafting your application, send it off, and imagine it landing on a recruiter's desk. Eventually now, sometimes it feels like it just vanishes into this digital funnel. The whole process feels so different.
Oh, it absolutely has.
Yeah.
And it's way more sophisticated now than just like basic keyword matching. Companies are using systems like HireVue, Modern Hire, Pymetrics. These are complex tools. They're actively parsing, well, everything. Your posture on video, the tone of your voice in an interview, obviously resume keywords, but even your public writings. The AI then compares all these signals to data profiles of people they consider past high performers in that company. And it spits out a ranked list of candidates in minutes. It's a completely different ballgame.
Wow, in minutes. And the scale of this, it's not niche, is it? That 2025 Willis Towers Watson survey finding 2/3 of Fortune 500 HR departments relying on at least one AI screening layer, that's huge. It's basically standard practice at the top end.
It really is becoming the norm. And when you look at the efficiency gains, I mean, the numbers are just staggering. We saw one firm reporting they cut their recruiter workload by 40%. Just by automating the first round. And Hilton, that's a famous example. They cut hiring times from 6 weeks down to just 5 days.
6 weeks to 5 days.
Yeah. So for companies trying to, streamline their talent pipeline, that kind of speed and throughput is incredibly attractive, really compelling. Now, the proponents of AI in hiring, they really lean into this promise of objectivity. The argument is that these systems can strip out a lot of the human biases that, let's be honest, have plagued recruitment for decades. Algorithms, in theory, they don't have bad days. They don't have those ingrained personal prejudices that can unconsciously sway a human interviewer.
Okay, in theory. That sounds good, but does it always pan out? The confidence seems high, though. Like you said, as of 2024, 99% of Fortune 500 companies use algorithmic technology to assist with hiring. That suggests widespread belief in it, at least.
It absolutely does. And linking this back to the scale AI's ability to process just vast numbers of applications is something humans simply can't match. We're talking thousands in minutes. And some managers do report that these models genuinely spot hidden gems.
Yeah.
People who might get overlooked in a traditional process. And they feel it helps filter out biased human impressions.
Yeah. Something that really struck me from the research was this idea about identifying transferable skills. One expert pointed out, people are not always good at being able to list out all of the skills that they have, which is true. But AI can help us say, if a person has skill X, they might also have this other skill Y. So it's not just scanning for exact matches, it's inferring potential. That could really broaden the talent pool, couldn't it? Democratize things a bit.
That's a really critical point. And it speaks directly to that persistent problem of human bias. I mean, traditional hiring is just full of potential biases, right? Based on names, appearance, where someone went to school, that vague culture fit thing. There was that study, for instance, showing large language models, the tech behind many chatbots heavily favoring white-associated names, like 85% of the time. And female names only got favored 11% of the time when ranking identical resumes, which is pretty stark. However, and this is the key difference, proponents stress while bias can creep into AI, you can actually find it, you can measure it, and then you can potentially correct it through audits by adjusting the training data. That's much harder with hidden unconscious human biases.
Okay, so the potential for correction is there. But, there's a big but, isn't there?
The flip side is this whole black box problem. These AI systems make decisions using incredibly complex math, stuff that, frankly, even the people who built them can't always fully explain step by step.
Exactly. And imagine being the applicant on the receiving end. You just get this cold, generic email. You do not meet current criteria. That's it. No explanation, no feedback, no way to contest it or understand why. That lack of transparency, it completely undermines any feeling of fairness. It feels awful.
It really does. And it's almost darkly ironic, isn't it? The tech meant to remove bias can end up baking it in or even amplifying it. We mentioned the Amazon example earlier, scrapping their AI tool because it learned to downgrade resumes with the word women's, like women's chess club captain. It really hammers home that warning. Algorithms are not magic. They're simply tools.
And like any tool, they can be used well or poorly.
Precisely.
And this opacity isn't just frustrating. It's leading to real legal fights. Look at the Mobley versus Workday lawsuit from 2024. It alleges discrimination based on race, age, disability. The plaintiff claims they were rejected from over 80 jobs screened by Workday's tool. It really highlights how these opaque systems can create potentially systemic barriers.
And beyond the legal side, there's just the loss of human connection, right? AI just cannot pick up on things like genuine passion or creative thinking on the spot, or someone's resilience shown through their story. There was a study showing 78% of applicants felt undervalued. They reported this emotional disconnect, even a diminished sense of self-worth after being filtered by AI. That's a heavy psychological toll.
It really is.
Yeah.
And this impact, isn't always evenly distributed. Research showed Indigenous women, for example, they experienced significantly higher levels of anxiety and decreased performance just knowing an algorithm would evaluate their job interview. That points to a much deeper burden, this feeling of being judged by something impersonal, maybe even alien.
Yeah, and that extends to disability rights, too. A really concerning case in January 2025. Disability advocates sued a big logistics company. Their automated screener apparently rejected applicants using assistive communication devices because the system penalized, non-standard speech patterns, effectively shutting the door on qualified people who just communicate differently.
Which brings us to this kind of weird paradox around trust. It's fascinating. Recruiters often say they trust human recommendations more. But studies watching their actual behavior, they show recruiters are more influenced by AI recommendations, even when those AI suggestions are a bit inconsistent or off. So there's a disconnect between stated belief and actual practice, what we say versus what actually sways us.
That is weird. And meanwhile, on the candidate side, the discomfort is really clear. Over 2/3, 67% of job seekers say they're uncomfortable with companies using AI for hiring. And a huge majority, 90%, expect transparency. They want to know if AI is being used. They're afraid of being reduced to just, data points. I get that.
It really highlights a key part of the candidate experience. Yes, AI offers speed. You get a response faster, usually. But, as one source noted, 59% of job seekers expressed anxiety over the lack of meaningful feedback after automated rejections. They crave some kind of acknowledgement, something more than just a blunt, not selected email. There's a basic human need for understanding there.
Right, and you contrast that with traditional human screening. Okay, it's flawed, it has biases, it's slow, but it does allow for that back and forth, for clarifying something on your resume, for explaining a career gap, for actually advocating for yourself, which is so important, especially if you have a non-traditional background that an algorithm might just not understand or might misinterpret.
And the regulatory world is definitely trying to catch up with all these concerns. It's moving fast. You've got New York City's Local Law 144, for instance. That mandates annual bias audits for these automated hiring tools done by independent third parties. And over in Europe, the EU's AI Act enforcement, started in 2025, explicitly classifies recruitment AI as high risk, which means strict rules around transparency, bias monitoring, and importantly, mandatory human oversight.
Okay, so the rules are tightening. What does that mean for the companies using these tools in terms of liability?
Well, the EEOC guidance in the U.S. as the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission is pretty clear. Employers are still on the hook. They remain liable for discriminatory outcomes, even if they're using an AI tool they bought from a third-party vendor. They can't just, pass the buck, which logically leads to thinking about the rights of the individual applicant. And the EU's AI Act is quite groundbreaking here. It grants people the right to request explanations on the role of the AI system in the decision-making procedure. This directly tackles that black box problem we talked about. It demands a level of transparency that's quite new for many of these systems. It's pushing towards accountability.
So wrapping this all up, what does this mean for you listening right now, maybe navigating this job market? We've heard really powerful arguments for efficiency, for potential objectivity, but also these deeply compelling concerns about opacity, bias, and just basic human dignity.
Yeah, the core tension is still right there, isn't it? It's this potential for huge gains in speed and maybe statistical fairness, pitted against this really critical need for human nuance, for context, for seeing people as more than just a collection of data points. It's a tough balancing act.
That first doorway to economic mobility, it really does feel like it's at a major crossroads.
Absolutely. So maybe the final thought to leave you with is this. As AI keeps evolving in hiring, how do we make sure that this relentless pursuit of efficiency doesn't end up sacrificing the very human qualities that actually make us valuable? And maybe how can you, in your own way, advocate for a process that's more transparent and ultimately more humane in the future?